Morristown and Erie could not donate them, but we all had to, just like Tri-State, we all had to basically purchase them outright. And M&E and Tri-State, we all worked together to make sure that one got the home out in the Midwest, and the 19 got saved. Again, these are engines that all of us have a connection to. We've all ridden in them. We've been ridden behind them. So that's a super project. And yes, IRM, I see another note that IRM has the TPW 400. Yes, they do. And that one's an RS11. But IRM did not previously have an Alco Century, and they're trying to capture or preserve one example of each step in diesel development. And so this will represent Alco Centuries in their collection. They have everything from a box cab all the way up to new. In fact, I think they have B23s and some newer engines. So they've got a great collection at IRM. And if anybody gets a chance to visit, mention Tri-State, and they'll give you a warm reception.
All right, and the feed is running, so
okay.
Whenever you're ready to turn it over, Mike Rudy can start, and it'll capture it all.
All right. Well, we'd like to turn the show over to Rudy. Rudy Garbely is quite an accomplished individual, and and he's been a big supporter of Tri-State for a long time, and he's also a big part of our publications committee. Rudy's company called Garbely Publishing, he handles Tri-State's publishing and distribution needs. And that's a big help to Tri-State. And we're able to reprint a lot of our old titles, and we've got a few new ones in the works. So thank you, Rudy. And we're looking forward to your show.
Thanks for the introduction, Mike. Thanks, guys. Part of this was sent out in the description of the event, but I am currently working on a book on the Delaware Hudson, based pretty much primarily on employee interviews. In the process of doing that, I've acquired, it's going to be about 1,200 something slides of the D&H at this point. So what I'm going to do is share about 90 of them tonight, kind of in order, along with D&H from the south end to the north end. As for the stories, you'll have to pick the book, I guess. I'm still working on doing interviews, so that's probably late this year or early next year the book will be out. But let's see if I can share my screen here. Screen. Share. Okay. Okay, you guys see an Alco PA?
Yeah, we're good. Rudy.
Okay. All right. So the focus of the presentation and the book itself will be the D&H's ownership outside of its being self-owned. So in 1968, the D&H was purchased by Derico, which was a holding company owned by the Norfolk and Western. The holding company also owned Erie Lackawanna from 1968 until its bankruptcy in 72. Derico owned the D&H up until 1984 when it was sold to Guilford Transportation Industries. D&H went bankrupt in 1988 and was eventually sold to CP Rail in 1991. From the end of D&H's independent ownership up until its sale to CP Rail is the period the book covers. And that's also what we'll cover in this presentation. So here is a system map of the D&H. This is in the book. It's probably a little hard to read at this scale, but I'll zoom in a moment. D&H ran a little over 700 miles between Wilkes-Barre and Montreal. And you'll see here there's a couple extra areas that have been kind of added on here due to trackage rights or purchases from Conrail in 1976 and 1981. So what we're going to do is start down towards the south end of the railroad on what was originally the Pennsylvania's Wilkes-Barre branch that ran from Sunbury to Wilkes-Barre. This was acquired by the D&H in 1976 at the time of the Conrail merger to help the D&H compete with Conrail and be able to access Enola Yard and points south for some of their interchange traffic. And then we'll work our way up the original D&H Penn Division, which is the line in red. And then we'll go back and we'll take a look at the ex-Lackawanna, original Lackawanna main line. By the time the D&H acquired it in 1981, it was the Conrail Scranton branch. Let's take a look at that too. And we'll kind of just move our way up the line from here to Montreal. So let's get started. So we've got a D&H train rolling through right past the Sunbury Depot. This is July 22nd of 78. This is a southbound train heading down towards Enola. You can see 78. There's a mix of power here. The first two locomotives are GP39-2s that were ordered new by the D&H and delivered in early 76. And then there's a X-rating GP39-2 and an ex-Lehigh Valley GP38-2. Both of those were conveyed to the D&H at the time of the Conrail merger. Here's a northbound train, technically I guess eastbound train, leaving Sunbury, heading up towards Wilkes-Barre. The lead locomotive is an ex-Lehigh Valley GP38-2, trailed by a pair of X-rating GP39-2s. 7325 is one of the couple of engines that got the solid blue D&H paint scheme that was only applied in 1977. By 78, they'd switched over to using yellow noses on this paint scheme. This was a pretty unique scheme on that locomotive. You can see another engine here that was acquired by the D&H from the Conrail merger. This was actually Lehigh Valley C420, C414. This is a train heading westbound, southbound towards Sunbury. This is OEN2. This locomotive is now preserved on the Delaware Lackawanna in Scranton in its original Lehigh Valley yellow jacket paint. Skipping ahead a little bit, we're on to the original D&H here at Hudson. This is just north of Wilkes-Barre. You can see here, this is the kind of later variant of that all blue paint scheme with the yellow nose on it on U23B 2316. You're passing the tower there at Hudson. This was the original interchange between the D&H and the Pensy in Wilkes-Barre, just north of Wilkes-Barre, I guess technically. The D&H being owned by the NNW from 1968 to 1984 enjoyed an interesting relationship with them and had a lot of run-through power. You could very easily see a bunch of run-through NNW engines and even some EL engines on a D&H train. This is actually a D&H train at Pittston, Pennsylvania, led by a pair of NNW locomotives that were run through. You can see the lead headlight there is out on the front engine. And actually those two EL engines in the back there, this is April 25th of 76. These are actually D&H engines that had been swapped to the EL. They had three SD45s that were swapped to the EL. And at the onset of Conrail on April 1st of 76, they were swapped back to the D&H. So here they are in full Erie Lackawanna paint on a D&H train, 25 days into Conrail, going through Pittston. They were later patched out. D&H just put a blue stripe along the maroon. I think there's a photo of that later on in the presentation. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. Here we're on DuPont, Pennsylvania. We're working our way up towards Scranton. Set of EMD 4-axle Jeeps there, which is a pretty standard set of power on the D&H at this point in time. This is 1982, July of 82. I mentioned earlier that these GP39-2s, like the lead two locomotives there, the 7600 series, were delivered in early 76, like late March, early April of 76. They were ordered by the D&H to help with the increased traffic load that was expected due to Conrail. And a good portion of that order was delivered to the D&H without logos on it. They're rushed into production to get them to the D&H and get them out in time for the beginning of Conrail. So this picture was also taken on April 25th of 1976. It was in Scranton. And you'll see a pair of those GP39-2s that are brand new in this shot with no logos on them. Again, we're in Scranton here. This is 1972 or 3. A trio of Alco C628s here. They had essentially been sidelined very early in Conrail because they're unreliable and they tended to chew up the track. So the C628 fleet was sold to Mexican Railways in 1978, along with the PAs and the SP45s. So here we are in Scranton. This should be a semi-recognizable location for a lot of folks on this on the screen here. The background right here, if you see my mouse at all, that's a tower at Steamtown, and this is Bridge 60 back here in the background. And all the way on the right, top right there is the CNJ's freight station. So the track that they're running on in this view is now the DL's access to their shop complex, coming under Bridge 60 in Scranton. This is April 19th of 1980. Here we are at Taylor Yard. A little bit out of order there. That's all right. The Taylor Yard's on the I guess the kind of the west side of Scranton. It's been accessed by a ton of railroads over the years. For the D&H, it became a major interchange point with Conrail, and actually you can see here there's a Conrail B23-7 actually in the consist, in the D&H's consist, and that happened a lot in early Conrail, early D&H. They used to kind of swap power around just to get trains moving over the road a lot of times over shared territory. With all the CN and CP cars in this train, this is probably one of the paper trains coming out of Canada. There's no date on this photo, but it's probably late 70s, early 1980s. And that station was there at mouth of Taylor Yard up until 2010-ish, something like that. I don't remember exactly when that came down. Here's a great shot of former LNHR C420, originally acquired by the D&H from Conrail for parts. And they realized that it actually ran better than some of the other Alcos they had on the roster. Patched it to 401 and ran around like that in LNHR paint for a while. This photo was taken in July of 1981. This is at Taylor. You can also see one of the remanufactured C424Ms there on the right, 451, another one behind it, 454. And looks to be some kind of Jeep back there. This is an interesting shot, and there's a couple photos in this sequence we're going to see. There's another one coming up in a minute. I'm not really sure what the circumstances for this was, but this is actually March 7th, 1976. Penn Central ran trio of GP30s with the train over the D&H. I'm not 100% sure why that happened. There's photos of this train going under the Saratoga Viaduct. This is taken in Dixon City. We'll have another shot coming up later on in the presentation here of the same train. So again, I'm not sure of the circumstances, but this is actually a Penn Central set of power on the D&H. Very late Penn Central. So April 18th, 76. Kind of a grainy shot. This is a great shot of the kind of mismatch of very early Conrail's effect on D&H. This is 18 days into Conrail. All these engines have just been patched. You can kind of see the wonky 7 and the number boards and 7318 there in the beginning. These are all patched out Jeeps. Looks like three Reading Jeeps trailing the 2 Lehigh Valley ones. This is in Mayfield, Pennsylvania. This is just northeast of Scranton. here on Forest City, there's that same set of Penn Central Jeeps. I'm not sure if the D&H power broke down and the Penn Central Jeeps were called in to take the train the rest of the way or what. But here they are grabbing the train. You see the two different number boards in the 2213 there. So we're working our way up the mountain here. This is at Ararat Summit, Pennsylvania. So we're northeast of Scranton here. Trio 6-axle Gs on that train there. Here we are again at Ararat Summit. Total mismatch of power here. There's a unpatched Reading GP 39-2 there in the front. A RS-11, a pair of 6-axle GEs. This is 10 days into Conrail. So this is April 10th, 1976. So that engine had not yet been patched. Again, in Ararat Summit, I mentioned this earlier, the D&H's 3 SD45s were returned to the D&H in April of 76. In EL paint. And the D&H at that point was so scrambling to get everything patched that they didn't have the money or time to paint the engines. So this is 803 there in the lead of that train, patched from EL and D&H. They ran around like this for about 2 years. So yeah, I'm not really sure of the circumstances of this, but this power set cut off the train and then ran light. So here's the light power set running past the station in Thompson. That station is still there, but the tracks are gone. This is in February of 77. You'll note on the 803, it's got a weird L-shaped windshield that was typical to the Southern Pacific. The 802 and the 803 were, actually all three of the engines were EMD demonstrators. The 801 had a regular windshield, but the 802 and the 803 had the weird L-shaped windshields. And they kept that all the way through the D&H.
Oh, Rudy, we have a attendee giving us some information about the PC power.
Okay, I see that. Okay.
After Hurricane Agnes, PC power was used as pushers northbound to Storuca, met southbound. PC power cut off and ran southbound back to Buttonwood onto home rails.
Excellent.
So, thank you, Stephen, for that information.
Screenshot that and make sure I've got it in my book. Okay.
Okay.
Speaking of Storuca, we're coming up here on this is in Lanesboro. This is in July of 80. So this is one of the rebuilt RS3Ms there on the left, 508, and GP30. I'm sorry, a GP 39-2 X Reading, and a one of the as-built delivered D&H GP 39-2s there with a appears to be a piggyback train passing them. So the next shot I do not recommend. This photo was taken by the always enterprising Bob Wilt, who was standing on top of Saratoga Viaduct to grab this shot of the D&H passing below with an excursion train. This was taken May 26th of 74. This is a technically westbound, geographically northbound excursion train going under the bridge. And then heading the opposite direction, this is post-Guilford. This is a December of 1985 train being led by a complete mashup of Guilford power. There's a X-Main Central U25B back there. There's a looks like a U23B back there. There's a couple other Guilford painted GEs in that consist. I got a better view, kind of showing the bridge. This is says April of 74. This may very actually be either the same or it's part of the same series of excursions of that earlier Bob Wilt shot. Here we are coming north, north out of Lanesboro. This is on May 17th of 81. Lead locomotive is the Gray Ghost, one of a kind paint job on the D&H. Apparently painted this way because the D&H found they had an abundance of gray paint left and not a lot of blue. I needed to get the engine repainted, so it came out in this scheme: gray from head to toe with a blue stripe, and that was it. We are in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. So now we're going to run our way up the ex-Lackawanna line. This was purchased by the D&H from Conrail in March of 81, although it was used for some time before that under trackage rights agreements. The shots from July of 82. You can see a solid set of 6 EMDs on this train. I'm going to have to Clark Summit. This is the Lackawanna double track main line. Here was a vast improvement over the D&H's kind of ramshackle single track line, and the D&H's line was abandoned kind of in stages, but mostly by the mid 80s was pretty much gone. Hang on. Okay, there we go. D&H train with a couple of Conrail engines mixed in there. This is passing the station in La Plume, Pennsylvania. That station is still there. I believe it's still an Agway. So this is along the Lackawanna in the early 1980s. Here we are coming into Nicholson. This is July of 82. This is that same train that we saw at Clark Summit earlier. And then pretty famously, here's the Nicholson Viaduct. You can see in this consist here, there's a Lehigh Valley C420. There's the single X NYHR C420, a pair of E2030Bs. And you can see the abundance here of CP and CN paper cars coming down out of Canada. Here we are at it's just south of Hop Bottom, Pennsylvania. Just kind of a little bitty town with some really nice sweeping curves to take photos in. This is coming up into Hop Bottom, just about to pass the former station site. The station was still probably here at this point, behind the photographer. This is the early 1980s. And then roughly the same angle in the Guilford era. This is April 15th of 1988. You can see that one track has been ripped out, but the track that's still there is in decent condition. So what we're going to do is move up a little bit now, up to the Susquehanna division, or the second division, subdivision rather, depends on what era of D&H you're talking about, which ran from Binghamton up to Albany and Mechanicville. So we're going to start in Binghamton and work our way east. So obviously post Guilford here. This is, I say post Guilford, I mean after Guilford's bankruptcy. Guilford put the D&H in bankruptcy, I'm sorry, in 88. And the D&H started to regain some of its own identity back. So these are a pair of ex-D&H C424Ms in Binghamton in the yard, in Conklin Yard, ex-Lackawanna Yard, that had been patched back to D&H while the railroad was under Susquehanna operation. So this is just up at the end, very, very tippy end of the Lackawanna going into Binghamton here. That the D&H purchased in 1981. You see a Susquehanna engine behind at the sanding towers there. There's actually an old D&H tender off on the left side. This photo was taken in January 6th of 1990. So here we are in downtown Binghamton. Anyone that's been there should pretty much recognize that the buildings there on the right side. But I mentioned before that the D&H would have a lot of run-through power, especially pre-1972, but even after that point, DNH would have a lot of run-through power from the M&W because of their ownership. So this photo was actually taken in January of 1977. This is a D&H train coming in from Buffalo with a full set of M&W power. I know there's a SD45 in the front, some kind of G9 it looks like, and an RS11 pulling a D&H train from Buffalo to Binghamton. Here we are again in Binghamton, and this is September 3rd of 1978. Again, a mismatch of D&H Jeeps on this train. Their kind of primary road power at this point was all the Jeeps that they'd acquired themselves or from the Reading and Lehigh Valley. We are right in the middle of downtown Binghamton. There's a ex-Reading GP39-2, C420, a Jeep and a GE here. So there's EMDs, Alcos, and GEs all on the same train. This is probably taken in the very early 1980s. Kind of exemplifies why the D&H was such a sought-after rarity, especially in this time period, because you could really get just about any kind of engine on any train with no rhyme or reason to it. So you never knew what was coming next. It was always a exciting time to be trackside. And any paint scheme too. There's a complete variety of red Lehigh Valley engines and green Reading engines and multiple different D&H schemes that were all on the rails at this point. So we are in the yard in Binghamton. Again, a couple other varieties of paint schemes here. You can see the yellow nose on the B23B second out, the lightning stripes C420 in the back. There's a tiger stripes on the lead GP38-2. This was taken in August of '82. Again in Binghamton. Now this is actually prior to the D&H being purchased by Guilford. The D&H, however, had some run-through trains that they were operating with the Boston and Maine, and by extension the Maine Central, prior to that, starting at about 1980 or 1981. This is one of those run-through trains coming down out of New England into Binghamton. And as the 80s wore on, some of the paint schemes got even more and more interesting. You can see here is the next Lehigh Valley GP38-2. It is rumored, and I have not been able to verify this with the shop guys, and I may be able to come up soon in an interview. It's rumored that they didn't wash the engine before they painted them. So they kind of just slapped on some blue paint and hoped it would stick. For some reason, the blue paint did not stick as well as the yellow paint. So by the late 80s, you started to see engines like this that had a yellow nose and were almost completely Lehigh Valley red or red and green again. So this is taken in Binghamton. This is January 30th of 1988. You can see a set of ex-M&W high-nose SD45 there behind it. Been purchased by Guilford. So we are heading up out of Binghamton at this point, kind of northeast along the D&H. You can see again here another consist. We got a EMD, an Alco 405 back there, which is actually on the Delaware Lackawanna now, and it looks like a Conrail GE in the back. So one engine from each builder. Again, Guilford era, you could get another pile of different paint jobs here. You can see here the ex-Boston and Maine Jeep in the front there, and a whole pile of different D&H paint schemes there. There's an ex-Conrail Jeep in the middle. The fourth engine back is a Reading Jeep with all the Reading yellow bleeding back through on the number boards. So I couldn't get away from this presentation without showing the Sharks in some capacity. So there they are passing the yard limit sign coming into Binghamton. The D&H acquired these in 1974, actually for a motive power shortage. They just needed an engine that ran and saw them on the market and decided they'd be pretty good for running the Sayer turn. So this power set primarily worked out of Binghamton and ran the Sayer turn down to Sayer and the Lehigh Valley. And when they weren't doing that, they were using pusher service north out of Binghamton up to Belden Hill. which is where we're headed next. So we're coming up on Belden Hill Tunnel, northeast of Binghamton here. This is May 17th of 81. So the lead engine has never been painted D&H. It's still in full running paint, just patched. I got a variety of paint schemes here and a variety of builders. There's EMDs, Alcos, and GEs on this train coming north out of Binghamton. And we're approaching Belden Hill here. There's a tunnel in the far right. A pair of D&H Jeeps in the front of this train, and apparently some wreck damage and the W power. Interestingly, heading north. I'm not sure where they're going, unless they're going to Colony to get fixed. But you can see the SD45 and the C30-7 there have both been pretty well damaged and some rented around that are mishap. This is taken in July of 1980. And again, same location at Belden Hill, just taken in the early 1980s. The hill here was significant enough to require pushers out of Binghamton. It was only about four or 5 miles by rail. But you could easily get a set of pushers cutting off a train, even on the fly. The tunnel was the peak of the grade. So that's exactly what's happening here. Is the pushers are cutting off the back of this train. Apparently, they did not do it on the fly, because you can see they just put a rear end unit on the back of the hopper car there. It's a pair of U-boats there. 758 was the only 6-axle U-boat to get painted in the solid blue scheme. Every other 6-axle U-boat was in the lightning stretch scheme. Here we are, pop out the other end of the tunnel. We saw this train earlier with the unpatched Reading Jeep on the front of it. It's a D&H RS3 behind it in the solid blue scheme that's been fairly recently repainted. And then the same location. This is just after Conrail started. This is April 10th, 1976, 23B, and it looks like an ex-Lehigh Valley C420 or 2 coming out of the tunnel, doing what Alcos do best. And here's that same train, about 4 miles east of that location. You can see that the 407 has not yet been patched, and the 413 is the second engine that has just had a white line put the Lehigh Valley on the side, but they never put a D&H logo on it. So going up the main line a little bit, here we are just south of Oneonta. This is a GP39-2 ahead of this train. Again, this is 1983. This is July 14th of 1983. So pre-Guilford purchasing the railroad, but you can see third back is a Boston and Maine GP38 number 307 in the consist. One of those run-through trains. So we're going to get up into the yard here in Oneonta. This is Lehigh Valley run-through power. This is August 1st of 1973. There's a quartet of Lehigh Valley C628 sitting in the yard in Oneonta, I'm sorry. And uniquely painted D&H RS36 number 5015. It's the only engine on the D&H roster painted in this experimental scheme. It tended to hang around Oneonta. It didn't stray too far from Oneonta during its service in the scheme. I got a couple photos of it leading to freight down to Binghamton, but it seemed that it was based out of Oneonta and basically ran locals and yard jobs in this area. Again, in Oneonta, here's one of the rail fan trips in 1974. Let everybody off in Oneonta to go poke around things, so you can see some women in the back by the U23B walking around. But there's a RS36 5014 and U25B there, 2305. This is April of 74. And that same day, here's a pair of C628s and a U30C sitting in Oneonta, again with all rail fans walking around them. So the Oneonta yard had a employee bridge that went over the top of it. One of the rail fans on that excursion was enterprising enough to go climb up on the bridge and take this nice overall shot of the entire yard in Oneonta. So again, April of 74, here we are in Oneonta. And the D&H painted 2 engines for the bicentennial. This is 1976, was a RS3M delivered back from its rebuild at Morrison Knudsen in late 75 in this paint scheme. You can see it's renumbered by this point. This photo was taken in 1979, renumbered back to its proper number of 506. They also painted U23B. It was 2312, became 1776, and was painted in a similar scheme. Behind the RS3 here, you can see 5015, which was that experimentally painted RS36. By this point, it's been repainted into a regular D&H solid blue with the yellow nose scheme. So we are coming at it Oneonta, pair of Alcos and a pair of EMDs there, pulling what appears to be a bunch of ballast cars or aggregate cars. These were cars that were used almost exclusively by the D&H, a very interesting design, 2-bay car. That if you're modeling this, you can't buy one of them, you gotta make one yourself. So good luck. This is October 10th of 82. On the same day, here's a nice overview of the far end of the Oneonta yard. By this point, the yard was essentially used for storage because the D&H had consolidated a lot of their operations to Binghamton after purchasing the Lackawanna. So these are a lot of D&H cars all here in storage. See some ex-Reading cars in there. Those are the green ones, are ex-Reading cars that have not been patched out, or have been patched out rather, I'm sorry. So we saw this engine in an earlier photo in pretty fresh paint coming out of the tunnel at Belden Hill. Here it is a little bit later. And again, they never washed the engine before applying the solid blue paint. So that's the original lightning stripe on the 5003. It's an RS11, bleeding through the solid blue paint. This is March 28th of 1987. And we're in Schenectady here, which is the north end of the Susquehanna Division. Anyway, we're on Scotia, New York. That's up in the Schenectady area, if you're familiar. Again, a bizarre mix of a RS36 and a U23B here. This is on February 5th of 1973. You'll notice the U23B has still got a 3-digit number. These were later renumbered. Well, they added a 2 to the front to make it a 2300 series instead of a 300 series. So we're going to move up to the Saratoga Division, which is the 3rd subdivision, which is labeled in purple here. We'll do a little bit of coverage on some of the branch lines and stuff in this area, but not a ton, just for the purposes of moving us along this presentation. This was the first area on the D&H that had passenger service. D&H ran passenger service from Albany up to Montreal in various formats. They did it prior to Amtrak. Kevin, I'm not sure where those 2 photos in Oneonta were taken exactly. I'd have to go back and look at a map to find out exactly where they were taken. And thank you, Stephen, for the those cars were for the end of the North Creek branch. Those aggregate cars. Which you can see on this map, actually, at the top of this map, Tahawas, the North Creek branch. So D&H ran passenger service on this line up to Montreal prior to Amtrak. It was then canceled for a couple of years under Amtrak, and then they brought it back with the D&H as a contractor to Amtrak in '74, I believe it was. So we'll see a little bit of that in this section as well. We're actually going to start there. This is a D&H passenger train. I'm not sure what train. Behind D&H PA 18, this is in Rensselaer on the east side of the river. This would be 1970, March 21st of '71. So this is just before Amtrak took over and the service was canceled temporarily. So one of the things the D&H did to supplement the Alco PAs was acquire two steam generator equipped RS3s from Boston and Maine, just to help pinch hit if the PAs were out of service. And they were also used when the PAs were being rebuilt in the mid-70s. So this photo was taken in August of 74. This is one of the 2X Boston and Maine RS3s, which you can tell by the steam generator stack and the ankle number boards there on the end. And the fact that the numbers were not anywhere near the normal D&H number series for RS3s. The D&H was experimenting with all kinds of weird paint colors at this point, so I think that possibly offers an explanation for the silver trucks and underframe on this engine. But that did not last very long as a paint scheme for D&H. So just north of Albany was the D&H's main diesel facility, called Colony, but typically was actually in just north of Albany in Watervliet, near the Arsenal. Colony was actually west of this location, so I'm not sure how they got the name from a different location. But anyway, this was the sign on the side of the building in October of '82. PAs have been off the property now for about 4 years, but they still had it on the sign. Colony was also the main offices for the railroad and dispatching center. So this is the same day, October 10th of '82. This is the Blue Room. You can see they're actually planning out power across the whole system. And this actually includes Conrail territory. So right here is Bethlehem and Allentown on the map. Reading. Here's Newark, New Jersey. Here's Philadelphia. Here's Harrisburg. And Buffalo up here in the top left. And each of these little magnets here on the board represented a locomotive or other piece of equipment. Like 3508 here is a caboose. So that's how they managed where all the equipment on the railroad was. Here we are inside the Colony shop. This is May 30th, 1970. You can see a U30C there with its hood torn off, getting some major maintenance, and low nose Alco, probably an RS11 or an RS36 in the foreground. Here we are again in Colony. This is in the shop. This is the paint booth in the Colony shop. That's a D&H Youth 23B, getting some work done in the paint booth, some touch-up paint probably. This is before it was renumbered. So this is still in the 300 series. They were, again, later renumbered to the 2300 series. This is September 26th of 1972. There's a whole bunch of traction motors staged there in the foreground. Traction motors or wheel sets for traction motors. So I mentioned earlier that the D&H started using a solid blue paint scheme in about 1977. This was the first engine rolled out of the shop in that solid blue scheme, which, according to the D&H's 1977 newsletter, which I happen to have here somewhere, saved them about $600 per paint scheme, which is how much they were cost cutting at that point. So here's, I don't know if you can see if anyone's looking over here, there's the newsletter. You can't really see it in the background on. But advertising that engine to their employees that they were saving money on the paint schemes. Note they didn't bother to buff out the dent in the nose before they painted the engine. So this is taken about September of 1977. This was the first engine in solid blue. And they modified the scheme several times after this point. Case in point, here's one of the U23Bs in 79 in the solid blue scheme, but you can see they've added the scare stripes to the nose. And they stopped using the all yellow nose scheme that was used in about only 1978 or so. This is behind the Colony shop. That's part of the arsenal up there in the top right. And again, at Colony, this is one of the D&H's subsidiary railroads, the Naperville Junction Railway, that operated in Canada. D&H actually purchased the railroad about 1907 and kept it operating as a subsidiary for some tax reasons to have the Canadian railroad separate from the U.S. one. This is in the Naperville Junction boxcar that's made its way down to the D&H shop in Colony. There's a lot of overlap by the mid-70s, and this photo was taken in October of '82. So the next photo is kind of a little known piece of trivia. D&H famously owned 4 Alco PAs that were painted that were purchased from the Santa Fe and were painted in a modified war bonnet scheme. But they actually owned a 5th PA that was purchased for parts, and it was ex-New Haven 783. So here it is. I actually don't know exactly where this photo is, but I presume it's somewhere in the area of Colony, being shipped to Colony. So ex-New Haven 783. You see a central D&H in this photo. I was basically parked at the Colony shops and picked for parts for several years. This photo was taken in February of '68, and the engine was gone by the mid-1970s. They'd scrapped it. You can see here by the early 80s, Colony was starting to pile up locomotives that were no longer operable. This one happens to be an ex-Lehigh Valley GP38. It was out of service for some reason. You see the paint on this engine bleached terribly. I believe they tried a different formulation for that blue paint. The first ones didn't stick too well, and they came up with this, which this is blue on top of red and somehow turned green. So here we're at Colony, and again, November of '83, the deadline of locomotives. So heading north out of Colony, the next major location of D&H was Mechanicville. Mechanicville is a major interchange point for the D&H. It's where the interchange with Boston and Maine. That's where basically a good chunk of the New England-based traffic ended up going to and from. So at Mechanicville, D&H entered from the south, from 2 different directions actually, and the B&M entered from the north. So here is the diamond at the east end of Mechanicville. At XO Tower, the D&H crossed over the B&M, and D&H C628 crossing that diamond. This is August 11th, 1968. Here we are in the yard in Mechanicville. It's a better shot of the bicentennial RS3M before it was renumbered. The shot was taken in June of '76. This is in pretty fresh paint at this point. This engine actually survives today. It actually survived into about 2014 or 2015 in this paint on the Tioga Central, and it was eventually purchased by the Western New York and Pennsylvania, and it's now up and based out of Olean and in their corporate paint scheme. Another D&H subsidiary. This is the Greenwich and Johnsonville, which ran right along the New York and Vermont border, because technically the whole thing was in New York. This is an ex-D&H caboose that had been used by the G&J and painted in their orange scheme. And it made its way back to Mechanicville for one reason or the other. D&H had several different varieties of this caboose style. This one probably had a center cupola originally. It was removed. A lot of them had end cupolas. There's an example of this in Whippany, next D&H caboose with an end cupola, same construction. But the G&J is now operated by the Batten Kill Railroad, and we'll get to their locomotive, I believe, in a little bit here. But it is the original G&J 4118, 16? I don't remember. And it's still in orange paint today. So again, in Mechanicville, here's a D&H RS3 4085, one of the few RS3s that got the solid blue dip scheme. This is May of 1980. And anyone that's familiar with this locomotive will know this is the engine that's sitting in Port Jervis, New York, painted New York and Greenwood Lake Railway at the moment. Again, Mechanicville, this is on the Boston and Maine's turntable there in Mechanicville Yard. This is just after the D&H had been purchased by Guilford in 1984. So you can see we're starting to get a mix of power here. Some Guilford engines in the back. And again, the ex-Lehigh Valley 414 and D&H C424M 462. So coming up out of Mechanicville, the D&H Main, there's some fairly scenic areas of eastern New York State. One of them is in Saratoga Springs. There's a great shot of a D&H passenger train, probably Laurentian, in May 21st of 1770, coming up to Saratoga, passing signal on the DNH here behind PA number 16. And I mentioned earlier that the DNH had acquired 2 RS3s to pinch it for the PAs or handle extra traffic. Here's both of them at the station at Saratoga Springs on the Adirondacks. This is post-Amtrak. This is March 9th of 1975. And there's ex-Boston and Maine 1508, leading ex-Boston and Maine 1536. Those are both eventually renumbered into the DNH 4100 series. But here they both are with the silver paint in the trucks, pulling the Adirondack out of Saratoga Springs. A little bit of a detour here up the North Creek branch. This is the Bicentennial U23B that I mentioned earlier, 1776. Going through Corinth, New York, which is just northwest of Saratoga Springs on the North Creek branch. This is on September 3rd of 1977. Here's the 5002 again. You recognize the 5002 as the first engine painted solid blue. With the dent in the nose, they didn't bother to knock out before they painted the engine. So here it is in May of '84, about 7 years later, and the paint's a little bit worse for the wear. It's passing through Fort Edward, New York here. With the Boston and Maine caboose there beyond the engine. Continuing further north along the DNH, we end up in Whitehall, New York. February 1968, the DNH 17 there with probably the Laurentian. Very, very snowy February here. You can see the unique platform at Whitehall there on the left, sloping down from the actual building that was raised up a little bit. This is I guess it would be a southbound train. And interestingly, there are a couple instances where the DNH, either the PAs were down or they ran on a special train. And so they only had 4 PAs, they needed to borrow some power. So this is a ELE8, number 814, coming southbound into Whitehall with a DNH train in February 1970. Again, at Whitehall, here's a northbound train. Also February 1970, so obviously at least PA 19 was still in service at this point. And again, there's the 1508, still sporting some silver paint there on the trucks and the frame. Again, one of the ex-Boston and Maine RS3s acquired for pinch hitting and passenger service, but when it wasn't in passenger service, it was perfectly good for freight. Well, there it is in the yard in Whitehall. Working in freight service in July of 1975. Here's an interesting train around the DNH that's been kind of difficult to turn up some information on. During the 1980 Winter Olympics, the DNH ran a couple of special charter trains. Got pictures of them all over the railroad and very vague information about how they actually operated. But here it is behind, it's like an RS36 and an RS11 there. Actually, those might just be both RS11s. Going through Whitehall in February 21st of 1980. I mentioned earlier we're gonna cover a little bit of branches. This is the DNH's branch that reached out into Vermont. And again, I mentioned earlier again that the DNH sometimes borrowed power from the NW. So here's an NW RS11 in Vermont in February of 1970. So there was a prototype for everything. This is at Castleton, Vermont. Any of you that saw the caboose photo that was used for the presentation photo, that's the back end of this same train in the same location. And the D&H on this branch interchanged with their subsidiary, the G&J. So here we are at Greenwich Junction, New York, which is on the Washington branch. D&H RS 11 5001 and the G&J's RS3 number 4116. So that engine, the 4116, is now owned by the Bat and Kill, and it's still in that paint today, operating on home rails. So we're going to move a little further north. Whitehall was the division point between the Saratoga Division and the Champlain Division. So the Champlain Division is viewed here in blue. And we'll cover from here north. There's not a ton of photos here because a lot of this was somewhat inaccessible due to its running along the banks of the river and there not being a road there. But we got a couple photos here coming up, and we'll wrap up at Rouse's Point. We're not going to go into Canada in this presentation. So along the shores of Lake Champlain, by 1977, the D&H's PAs had basically been removed from passenger service on Amtrak, and they were, I believe by this point, they had finished up their time on the MBTA, released there for a while. They were in commuter service out of Boston. They found themselves in freight service on the D&H. So here's all 4 D&H PAs on a freight train coming southbound along Lake Champlain. This is on May 12th of 1977. They were sold the following year to go on to Mexico. And here's an interesting trip. This is the date of the slide is May of 71, but I think it actually occurred earlier than that. This is an Amtrak inspection trip. When they were looking at the line to explore the feasibility of running Amtrak service along with D&H, ultimately decided not to. So there's a pair of E8s there. This is at the Plattsburgh, New York station. This is early 1971. I don't think it's May. I think it was like March or April. Again, at Plattsburgh, this is the further end of the same platform. This is May of 71. Probably the Laurentian here coming down from Canada. And we're in Rouse's Point. So these are both of the Naperville Junction's locomotives. They were RS2s. It's 4050 and 4051. You can see the 4051 is painted in basically D&H's lightning stripe scheme with a slightly different logo on the side of the cab. And 4050 is still wearing the D&H's original black with yellow lettering scheme. This is taken November of 72. At some point, when most of the local freight dried up along the Naperville Junction, D&H decided to kind of operate it just as a through route, although kept it on paper as a separate railroad. The 2 engines are moved down to Rouse's Point and ultimately disposed of. So here they are in storage at Rouse's Point. And again, at Rouse's Point, this is making the station stop there. You got an RS3 off on the right, and obviously a D&H passenger train. This is the Laurentian on June 11th of 1969. Laurentian was train 35 here. And you can see a bizarre baggage car there that D&H owned, and an XEL, I believe, coach or diner. I don't remember which car that is. That has just been patched Delaware and Hudson. They ran that like that for quite a while. So the last photo in the presentation I've got here is a great shot inside of the Laurentian. So this is the dining car, James Peak, on that train on June 11th of 69. You can see this is interesting configuration of chairs there on the right. Triangular tables, a 2-seater that doesn't quite face each other. You face each other at kind of a 45-degree angle. So this is just kind of the interior of one of the D&H's trains, and yeah, it was a good photo to end on. So that's it. I mentioned this photo earlier. It was in Castleton, Vermont. If you want to learn more about the book I'm working on, if you want to contribute photos, if you know anybody that worked for the D&H and want to be interviewed, There's more information at that link, DelawareHudson.org. And I think that's it for me. So thank you guys very much for watching. And if you got any more questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Actually, Rudy, I'm going to bring Carl Belke on. For those who may not know Mr. Belke, he was president of the Delaware and Hudson at one point, along its long and storied history. Also held executive positions with the Livonia, Avon, and Lakeville, as well as the Western New York and Pennsylvania, and now consults in the transportation field. There have been, what Rudy, while you were speaking, a whole bunch of folks who had a lot of really great questions and
Sure.
just a lot of observations and information. So I see there's a couple of hands raised. There's some things in the chat window. Just give me a second to get.
Sure. Carl was kind enough to sit with me for a 2-hour-long phone interview and has been very patient with some other questions I've got. I got more for him, which he doesn't know that yet, but coming his way.
And there he is with great photo props. I like it. There's hang on. We'll just go through some of the hands that are raised here, and we'll hang on one second. Mr. Balford, if you unmute, we should be able to hear you. You can ask your whatever questions you may have.
Actually, I don't have any questions. It was a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rudy, I can tell you, Rudy has been spending a lot of time on this, and he did a really accurate and fantastic job. I enjoyed myself thoroughly.
Thanks, Carl.
And the next hand, here's Edward Seaman. I just brought you on here. If you unmute, we'll be able to hear you.
How you doing, sir? Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I wanted to thank the gentleman for putting all that time and effort into this. I know we had to do a lot of research. But I grew up in Corinth where the paper mill was, and I watched the D&H, and then I worked in Albany, and I watched the D&H. I don't live in New York State anymore, but I'm always interested in D&H, so I appreciate his work. I know it's easy to put it up there on the slides, but all the work behind it is much appreciated by myself. And I do have some contacts still in the Capital District area, particularly in my hometown, which was a huge customer of the D&H, the International Paper Company. And there was a gentleman there that was the IP photographer for 40 years. And he has 40,000 photographs on that haven't been scanned yet. So I'm trying to find some way to get those. Many of them were of D&H trains that came into the mill. So anyway, if you're interested in any of that, let me know and I will put them in touch with the curator of that collection.
Sure.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lots of compliments, Rudy, but I guess for Rudy and Mr. Belke, a question from Kevin Moore. The earlier photo from Oneonta shows the coaling tower, powerhouse smokestack, and the edge of the roundhouse. A good book on the Oneonta roundhouse was authored by Jim Lawden of the Leatherstocking Society. All were gone by the second photo, so I don't know if you guys can maybe add a little more information or background to the unfortunate destruction of a lot of that, but I know there's some pretty iconic structures that disappeared there.
Yeah, I can pull that photo back up actually and zoom in on it a little bit if you guys want.
Sure.
Oneonta is a very sad place to go to right now. When you see that one photo that was taken from the Fonda Avenue overpass, and all the cars in the yard and so forth, it's virtually a single main track through town now with a switch that services, I guess it's Nesbit still is pretty busy there, but most of the shop buildings are gone. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if the powerhouse stack is still there. I remember seeing the stack standing there alone some years ago, but it may well be gone now. I was last in Oneonta about a year ago, but it just astounded me as to how everything has just disappeared there. I believe the paint shop was still there and a piece of the big shop was still there, maybe a little bit of the oil house or something like that, but by and large everything else just bombed out and gone.
Here's the image we were talking about here. You can see the coal tower here on the left. There's a smokestack that's still there. You can just see the roundhouse here kind of beyond the weeds. This is the end of the roundhouse here.
And Mark Mateo adds the paint shop is still standing, track removed.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see. The next question. What's happening currently regarding the North Creek branch, please?
So, from what I understand, they were turning the north end of it into one of those rail bike things, or a rail trail, or some combination of the two. Honestly, there was so much politics involved in that I kind of just tuned it out. So I haven't watched a whole lot of that in the past year because it's been a hard year for everybody else already. I don't need more politics in my life. So
there's a very successful rail bike organization headquartered in North Creek, and they run 3 or 4 miles out and back. That's about all I know about it. To the best of my knowledge, the tracks are still into Tahawas. And let's see, what's Ralph saying there? Ralph just had a comment. I missed it. But,
there's another proposal to return passenger service to the branch.
Oh, wow. That would be fantastic.
We'll see where that goes. And Bill Phillips adds Adirondack Park Agency is fighting over the Tahawa stretch, track still there. And Carl, I think I can't find it now, but you had commented when Rudy was talking about the Blue Room about who built the board, and if you had any more information about that, I think that would be pretty interesting. That's a view you don't often see.
Yeah, Tony. Well, the board was built by Tony Steele. When we expanded, and when the dispatchers were moved from the old building up to Colony. We put together our own power desk, and I'm trying to remember that I believe it was pretty much operated most of the time by High Griffin. I know he had a lot to do with it. So did Gordy. Gordy, of course, was dispatching at the time. So many names and people there, but we grew so fast in a couple of months' time. If you'll remember, the extension lines were a real surprise to us, and it all happened in about 3 months that we had to prep and get everything taken over. So Joe Woods was superintendent at the time. He was very much involved. Bill Farley, who's on this call, may have had a hand in it also. But it was very rapidly put together, and Tony Steele was an engineer for a civil engineer for the railroad at that time. He made the famous map that everybody has framed all over the country, and he was just a really particular individual. So you saw that board. There wasn't a piece of track or switch that Tony missed. It was all there. And it was a metal board, so they had magnetic tags, and all of the cabooses and locomotives and spreaders and cranes and maintenance away equipment had tags, and the guys just got up and moved them around the board every hour or so just to keep things current. So management could walk in there and just take a glance. It just predated computer screens. Essentially, it was a mechanical, a man-moved computer screen, if you will, and you could walk in and take a glance and see what was going on. And you were never probably more than an hour off in where things were at the time. So it was an excellent pre-stage to the CAD machines that everybody is using today.
One of our directors is inquiring as to whether that board was saved.
I don't think so. I think it's somebody may have nailed the magnetic tabs or something like that. I actually have I have 2 boards from the big dispatcher machines that were in the building. They were moved up from downtown up to Colony, and when they were tearing those out, I did some dumpster diving at the time. I know a number of people got pieces of the boards, but not enough to ever put it all back together again.
Yeah, Carl, were you part of the D&H when they took over the Lackawanna segment?
Yes, I was.
Was that was that an offer you couldn't refuse, or?
No, that was again. I mentioned Joe Woods before, so that was Joe Woods, Howard Hans, Dick Williams. The Ararat line was in such horrible condition, and we were having massive derailments weekly up there. Farley remembers this because he was there picking a lot of them up with me, and it just came to be that it needed millions of dollars of new rail and ties and surfacing, and the dormant Conrail XDL line was laying there, and it was in still pretty good condition. The first train that we ran over it with a load of dignitaries, I think I remember going like 50 miles an hour. The signal system had been decimated by the time that we took it over. So we took it over dark, and then we upgraded it to I always called it a poor man's CTC. We had Nicholson, hot bottom, a couple of interlockings that we put out there, but they were standalone pieces of double track, and then you ran dark in between. And yeah, so that was the other aspect of that was East Binghamton Yard, which was not in really great shape. We had to do a lot of work to get that up to speed, and but as soon as East Binghamton Yard was up and running, I remember that everybody was all about starting to shut down Oneonta. That was the beginning of the end of Oneonta when we started the yard. So
it was much of a transition to go from Ararat to the Lackawanna. I know you had junctions to play with at like Jefferson and around Staruka, Lanesboro.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We had to keep the bypass. We had to keep that piece of the route for high wides, and I remember using the line from Nineveh down to Staruka while the tunnel was raised. They raised the roof of the tunnel and lined the tunnel, and so there was a period of at least 8 or 9 months, maybe more, where everything ran to Jeff Junction. And we kept a set of swing power there and put the power on the other end. And then the road power that came down was the next set of swing power for the next train that came along. It was a pretty neat, neat operation.
And I remember watching that. I think the rail fans then called it the Jeff Junction Jack Around. I didn't understand what I was watching until years later,
Yeah. Right.
But that was a fun era all around,
Well, you had to keep an eye out for rattlesnakes in the summertime and stuff.
Right.
It was fun. We had a terrible head-on collision down there in the fog because a set of swing power was not left where it was supposed to be, and they found it in the fog. So. All sorts of fun stories.
As a matter of fact, I remember that first trip down there was with J.J. Young. And
I'm sure J.J. was all over the place, but obviously Rudy was too.
But J.J. always had a fun story and a quip and everything to go along with it, So it was. I'll never forget J.J. I've spent a lot of time with him in the early years. For my early years.
a name we can't forget for that area and all over the show that we just saw from Rudy is Bernie O'Brien.
Bernie O'Brien.
I mean, Bernie was like headquartered there at Jeff Junction for that runaround for a while. So
beautiful.
Yep.
And it was a tribute naming a locomotive for him too. That B&H did that later on. You know,
we did that when we that happened under the directed service. So during the directed service operation, we worked out an arrangement with CSX whereby we were going to take the, by that time, the 7400s and the 7600s were all well past an overhaul. And so we set up a deal with Mars and Knutson in the short period that they had their facility at Mountaintop, Pennsylvania. And we were going to run 35 EMDs, Jeep 38s and Jeep 39s through there. CSX was going to underfund it. And I think we got 10 of them done. And then CSX pulled the plug on Walter and they pulled the plug on our locomotive project. But it was during that time that I was able to get one of those units. One we named Competition. I can't remember the numbers at this point in time, but we named one Competition and we named one the BC O'Brien. And we had a dedication ceremony on the shop floor for Bernie. I remember at least 50 or 60 people and a big cake for that event and stuff. It was a great day for a great man.
Oh, that was very nice. I think Bernie was 7312, as I recall.
If Bernie was 12, then Competition was like 11 or 13 or something. But yeah,
I brought. I'm sorry. I brought Stephen Tyke in. He had a number of pretty interesting comments before, and I hand raised now. So, Mr. Tyke, I know you contributed some really good stuff in the chat window. If you had something else for us, please feel free.
I actually just wanted to add a little bit to the PC power discussion. From, I think it was about 1974, after the Sunbury to Wilkes-Barre section of the PC got rebuilt, because Agnes had obviously decimated it pretty badly. What the D&H and the PC worked out was the northbound, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the S80 is the northbound. The northbound would come out of Buttonwood with the D&H power on the head end and the PC power as pusher power. And it would run north to Staruka, and they would meet the southbound counterpart S81. The D&H power would cut off the southbound. The PC power would become the southbound's power and head back south. The D&H power would push the rest of the way. And this lasted until basically April 1st, 1976. But that's why you see PC power leading D&H trains on D&H rails for the last 2 or so years of the Penn Central. So, you know, it's something that happened fairly often. There's a couple local railroaders and D&H guys, Eddie Zeck and Jimmy Kilcullen, that caught this a number of times and have some great pictures. In fact, I think there's one of the shots was taken May 31st, whatever, 1976, like the last southbound. So, but
Jimmy's on my list. I haven't been able to reach him yet, but I did talk to him, and Norm Barrett talked to him on behalf. So we're getting there. I just haven't actually got a hold of him yet.
Yep, excellent. Well, yeah, they'll definitely be able to assist you there. So,
excellent.
But yeah,
excellent.
And great presentation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyke. Rudy, I know you want to answer that sort of more involved question about what's left, but before you get to that, there was a quick inquiry about traffic to and from the Air Force Base in Plattsburgh. Was that a
Yeah, so it was
thing?
served briefly, but I don't know exactly the dates that they stopped serving that. I imagine it would have been kind of the same, early to mid Cold War time period that a lot of the bases around the country stopped getting rail service or stopped needing rail service, but I don't know exactly the date.
Well, now I'm going to show you my failing memory, but there was a branch. There was a branch that wrapped around the airfield, the Al Sable maybe, or something like that, and it may well still exist because it was serving the and the name of the firm has changed so many times, but who was building the passenger equipment up in that area? It might have been Alstom or somebody like that, but I know we went out there and served that plant. I vaguely remember, I don't remember if there was a paper mill, but there were a couple of customers out there. Ralph says Bombardier, and he's exactly correct. Are they still there, Ralph? See if we can get an answer out of him.
I just brought Ralph, if you want to unmute him.
Yeah, they closed up that operation a few years ago, and I believe the only rail car service is now at down on the southern tier. The old EL shops at Hornell.
Okay.
But I did go up to Bombardier one time when they were building subway cars with Dave Hoadley. We had to remeasure the track because it had been the Air Force Base had been closed, and we were now able to go directly off the branch. And you're right about it. It was the Sable branch that went up the other side, and damned if I can remember what there was another branch that came off there and went around, and that was tied into the branch that went up into the. It took 3 branches to get up there.
It did. Mm-hmm. It absolutely did. Yeah. You mentioned Dave Hoadley, my first railroad boss ever. So Dave was a great guy.
He and I are active in a model railroad club if we ever get back to get out of this pandemic.
Tell him I said hello, please.
I will do that. We're gonna hopefully open up the second floor of XO Tower to the public sometime in the future.
Yes, wonderful. Just a little factoid over my shoulder here. The bookcases came out of the Plaza building, which is now the New York State headquarters building. I think many DNHers probably have sets of these. They were in the building by the thousands, and the black. It's hard to see, but the black scale up top is a specific gravity scale out of the colony shops that the mechanical department used to. You had to very precisely weigh vials of or jars of engine oil and check for metallurgical content. So I nailed that. All this stuff was going into dumpsters, and so we were regularly dumpster diving back in the Guilford days.
I grabbed the map out of the boardroom when it was in Building 6 in Colony before Guilford threw us out of that building.
Perfect. This stuff over here is Rock Island, so you don't care.
Well, I got to run one of the ex-Rock Island U-25s down in Kenwood one time. They were lousy switch engines.
Oh, they were horrible. The U-25s were. Well, we had a lot of bad power on the Rock, but they were especially bad.
Rudy, do you want
very slippery.
While we have Mr. Belke, you want to speak a little bit about how much of the DNH is still in use, or what's left?
Yeah, I mean, basically, with the exception of a couple branches, really the vast majority of it is still there. The only real main abandonment was the most of the Penn Division between Nineveh Junction and Scranton, which was abandoned after they got rid of Lackawanna, but everything else is basically intact.
Yeah, there are a couple of the North End branches are, there's a couple of big branches up north that are gone. Chateauguay branch, I think, is mostly gone. We had
Ticonderoga's gone.
And Ticonderoga's gone. We had a very close call with Conrail. Conrail did their best to argue that the Delaware and Hudson be folded into Conrail and not remain on its own. And they had a plan that would have eliminated the Delaware and Hudson. They were going to tear it up from Oneonta to up to Delancey for sure, and probably further. So that was quite a fight to make sure that Conrail didn't get their hands on the D&H, and it's one of the things that I'm most proud of, that the route structure is all still there, and I'm fine that it's Norfolk Southern. I'm just happy that there are trains on it right now.
One of the interesting parts at the beginning of Conrail, before Conrail, we used to watch the Penn Central Switcher. You come down to LA Cabin, come north past Colony up to up to Green Island, and then get on the old T&S branch. And after Conrail started, they refused to operate it, and the state of New York was paying us to run it. And I actually had a chance to ride with the crew up there one time. I think we only ran 5 or 6 trains up there.
Did it still cross the Northway at that time, or was it?
No, it was cut back. It only went as far as Route 9, and the line across Route 9 was terminated. We had the Ford tractor sales facility up there. That was still busy, but that's gone now.
Yeah, I forgot about that. You're right. That's right.
One little piece of tri-state trivia related to the D&H. I don't have a copy that I can hold up. The artwork for the block line shows an FA next to a block line phone booth. That phone booth is the one with the peak roof at Jeff Junction, which is, we always find that interesting. You know, it's not in New Jersey; it's up there. You know, so.
Also a hand raised from Ken Bitten. There we go, Mr. Bitten, go ahead. Hello, Mr. Bitten.
Muted.
We'll try Mr. Bitten back in a minute.
Ken was actually asking before in the chat about Howard Hauntz. Howard was the vice president of operations for a long time, and I've spoken to Howard at some length in the past couple of weeks. He started on the railroad when he got back from World War II in 1945. He retired in 1983.
1988.
1988? And he told me 83, right. So I'm not going to argue with him.
Right about the time of the bankruptcy. Okay.
And he's been corresponding with me. I'm emailing him. I've called him. Here's a letter he sent me. Hang on, I got to turn my background off. The letter he sent me on his original D&H letterhead. So he's been a great source of information.
He is sharp as a tack.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he
got
is.
all of his mental faculties, and he's just a lot of fun to sit and chat with.
He's got to be at least in his early 90s, right?
95 or 96 now.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct.
So fascinating stuff. I mean, he's got stuff on D&H Steam that he remembers because he was there for a lot of it. There's some incredible stuff in that man's brain.
I haven't talked to Chris McDermott for maybe a year, but I talked to an individual. If anybody remembers Freddie Cheney, former CMO, I talk to Fred all the time, and he had just talked to Chris a few days ago and said Chris was just as sharp as could be. He's not in good physical condition, but he was really sharp and really right on point with respect to all the knowledge that he has about the Alco world.
Chris McDermott.
I bought a car from Chris McDermott back in the late '80s. He bought it for his wife, and then she couldn't drive anymore. And it just so happened that I was looking for a second car.
And Mr. Farley, you'll be happy to know that I connected with Joe Museri last week and had a long talk with Joe. He's doing fine.
Richard Vanderbilt says, talked to Chris recently, sharp but 92. And also there was a one last question, it looks like, about the Ballston Spa branch and when that sort of
abandoned. I actually don't know. Carl, do you know the answer to that one?
Was gone it was gone before my time. So
okay.
Long gone.
I want to say it was sometime late 50s, early 60s. It's on the map that I drew because I wasn't sure, but I think it was gone before Derrico era, which was 68. So
yeah, I was going to say early 60s, something like that. It was a part of if I recall correctly, it was a big New York State line relocation. Got rid of curvature, got us out of downtown Saratoga Springs, and I believe it's how the current Amtrak Saratoga Springs train station got where it is.
Mm-hmm. And that was the 50s.
The Ballston branch was actually part of it was still in service into the 80s because we were still serving the nuclear plant for the Navy up there.
Okay.
I see Mr. Bitten raised his hand again. We're going to see if we can bring him on here. Mr. Bitten, you there now?
Yeah, now that I've realized I have to unmute, I'm good. Thank you. I wanted to ask Carl a question. It was interesting that you were talking about how bad the D&H was between Scranton and Nineveh. I had always gotten the impression, back in the day, that the reason the D&H picked up the old Lackawanna was because it was a better route, not because it was in physically better shape. And I guess I'm learning now that that's not the case.
I think both answers are correct. It was clearly a low-grade route compared to going over Ararat. As you know, the DL was wonderfully designed. They basically, the engineers back in 1913 or whenever, picked an elevation at Binghamton and an elevation at Scranton and said, we're going to stay here until we get to Clark Summit, and then did it. That's how the viaduct got there, and it's an amazingly engineered piece of railroad with real easy curvature. I think the worst degree of curve out there is maybe 3%, 3 degree curve, hardly any grades until you get to Clark Summit. So yeah, a far superior piece of railroad, number one, but it was clearly in a bit better condition than the Ararat line, which was just in need of a $10 million overhaul. That was, back in those days, 10 million was 100 million today, so it wasn't going to happen.
One of the interesting things to me is the fact that so much of the present operating D&H is competitive and a vibrant part of the rail system. And, as you guys know, lots and lots of things have been rationalized. And here we've got CSX and Norfolk Southern fighting over, Pan Am. But in reality, it's shocking how much of the original D&H was and still is an important part of the national network. And as kind of a student of the economics and the roots and stuff like that, it's fascinating to me that, it's still, NS bought it. It's fought over, it's desired. And not that there's a tremendous amount of traffic on it, but it is still regarded as an important route. And if you go back to, you know, some of the board games that people play and stuff like that, so many of the lines are no longer of significance. This one still is. It's kind of neat.
Under Canadian Pacific's ownership, CSX had trackage rights from Montreal. I don't ever recall their exercising them, but they had cut an agreement with CP and had trackage rights from at least Montreal to the Albany area, and then they were going to try to get over through Rensselaer and down that way or something. I remember this. I don't know if they still exist or whether they've been termed at some point, but yeah, you're absolutely correct. All sorts of people have vied for at least pieces of the D&H over the years.
The CSX plan was to come down from Montreal, down through Kenwood Yard and down the Albany Secondary to reach Selkirk. And then I don't know if the deal's gone through yet or not, but they've been looking to buy the Messina line from Conrail. So yeah.
I believe that's been consummated. It was awaiting STB approval, and I thought I had heard that they had gotten it and closed on that deal, but not sure.
Very good.
The last thing I heard was that because they had tried to cut Finger Lakes and some of the other short lines out of connections, that the STB was balking at it.
I don't see any more questions or comments that would really warrant reply from our panel of experts here.
Well, one thing I'd like to add is Chris McDermott, maybe 2 years ago, published a book about the 251 prime mover.
Yes, he did.
It's really an interesting book. If you search for it, I'm sure you can find it. Chris mails them from his home, and he signs them if you want. And he is in touch with Donnie Colangelo very often.
Right.
Sometimes, many times a week, sometimes a month, every month or so. And
he was super helpful to us on Western New York and Pennsylvania with a series of problems that we were having, and was really instrumental with the 506 when we acquired it. It's the WNYP 406, I think, but when we got it, it had a host of issues because everybody that had a hold of it for the past 15 years had, you know how things get tweaked and snipped and all sorts of things. So he helped us rewire it back to pretty much original as it came out of its Boise overhaul. So
nice.
He's been a fantastic friend and help to anybody with Alcos anywhere. So great guy.
Many times old equipment is over repaired. You know, they fix it, and before you know it, nobody can get it to work again. So.
Rudy, I'm telling you, you really took me back there. There's some of those shots are just wow. The memories really flow, and so thank you for that. It was just great stuff, really, and quality photography too, I'll add. So.
Yeah, and that was really just, I mean, almost random shots from what I've got. I mean, I think people sending me stuff. I've got a ton from my own collection. I bought a couple of collections of teenage photographers. And so that was really just kind of a like a generic set of photos that I have. I mean, I've got some specific stuff, and I'm looking to, really get the interviews done and then illustrate the interviews is really how I want to do the book. Because I think having, personal recollections and then having a photo to go along with it is much more powerful than just having a photo with a caption. So, hey, Mike Delvecchio.
Yes.
Question in chat that I was actually going to ask you as well, so I might as well ask it now. Where can we get that book that Chris wrote?
If you go, the easiest way to find a link is if you go on Facebook to the Alco Operators page and just search for either Chris McDermott or the Alco 251 book. The link and the address will be there. You got to write to Chris McDermott at his house.
Okay.
Send him a check and he'll send you a book.
Very good.
I don't have the link with me. When I find it, I'll see if we can somehow post it on our Facebook page, maybe.
Yeah.
Mr. Belkey, I thank you for joining us on the spot, as it were. Appreciate your input, and thank you, Rudy. And we'll let Mike Vecchio make our closing comments.
And good to see you again, Carl. Last time we were together, it was the DL 25th anniversary trip. We were.
That's right. That's right. My pleasure. Absolutely pleasurable evening. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you as well, and thanks everybody. Thank you, Rudy.
Thanks for having me.
I don't know if you know, Rudy, your background disappeared.
I know that. I turned it off because I was waving papers and stuff around here and showing things, and I couldn't make it work at the background. So.
Very good. Well, good night, all. We'll stop.
Yeah.